Hey, Dusty, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, I'm going to talk about a recent podcast I listened to about a really good debate between Flint Dibble, an archaeologist, and Graham Hancock, a journalist who's been studying a lot of things that have to do with archaeology. We talk about a bunch of things related to that, including some other historical events and things that happened. Really good episode. Hope you guys enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mishmash Men podcast. Today, again, you're here with me, Dustin Labar, and to my left, my direct and immediate left, Mr. Adam Mauser.
How do you do?
Hope everybody's doing good. Hope you all enjoyed last week's episode, and we have some more good episodes coming up, so we appreciate you guys tuning in. Really, actually, interesting thing that just popped into my brain is Gabby, Mabry's wife, Gabby.
Yeah.
Her cousin has just qualified for the Olympics.
I saw that. That's awesome.
We put it on at the gym. Apparently, I don't exactly know how, there's Greco-Roman and freestyle. I don't know the difference. I know there's different things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Yeah, I knew it one time.
Yeah, I think somebody told me about it once, but it's probably, I would never notice it. I think one is more upper body.
I think Greco-Roman is that.
More upper body.
Yeah.
So he had missed the Olympics on a bad call 4 years ago. So there was some major dispute that he that the judge made the wrong call and whatever. So we put it on. We were at the gym, and apparently it's a series. So the one that we watched, he lost, but I think it was a best of 3. So he must have came back and won 2 matches in a row. And then I saw Gabby had posted it. So it's pretty cool.
That is awesome
to know somebody that's
an Olympian athlete.
To know that's going to be an Olympian. When are the Olympics? Is it this year? 2024?
It's
every even year, right?
So it's every 4 years for the Summer Olympics and every 4 years for the Winter Olympics. Right. And they used to be the same schedule, but then they separated them by 2 years.
Yeah.
But I don't remember when the next summer.
They were even years.
They're always even, yeah.
So maybe it's either 24 or 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Probably 24, I would think.
It was summer this year.
If he just qualified, that's they're
fair.
building
Why
the
would
team.
They wait 2 years?
Yeah.
They're like, you'd made it. Don't get any older in the next 2 years.
And maintain weight.
Yeah, maintain weight. Well, while we were watching them, we were eating Chick-fil-A, so we would definitely not maintain weight. It was so good.
Good chicken sandwich.
I'll tell you that off air. I made I saved a Chick-fil-A sandwich, and then I made it better yesterday at my house. I'll fill you in on it after the episode.
Yeah, that's interesting.
About it. So today I want to talk about a couple things. One is going to be some sports performances that have happened recently, and it kind of made my brain think about some sports performances that I've seen in the past that are pretty awesome. But I wanted to touch base because it's very recent with you before it gets too far gone. And you may or may not watch the episode that I sent you where this is.
I did not see it. It's in my queue, though.
You may do it.
I've got a trip coming up. So
okay. So Joe Rogan had on Graham Hancock, who I've talked about multiple times on multiple different podcasts, and Flint Dibble, who is an he's an archaeologist.
Right.
A mainstream archaeologist is what Graham Hancock would call him. Part of the mainstream archaeology. Part
of the
cult.
system.
Yeah, part of the cult.
Graham Hancock, he's a journalist, then he writes a lot about...
He's a journalist who about 30 years ago or 20, 25 years ago decided that he had found some evidence of something, and then which I'll talk about, and he's really bought into it. And they were there to have a debate. And so the first thing, I was sending this picture to everybody because these guys do not like each other. And it's the most intellectual, conversation. And I texted the podcast guys, and I was like, because Andrew's interested in that too. And I said, it's like watching a UFC fight, but only using your brain.
Yeah.
So, because they were just back and forth. So, what the main argument is, Graham Hancock believes there was an ancient lost civilization that was far beyond our understanding of technology. So they had grown to this wild ability all over the world, and then there was a massive cataclysm. So that's I think a meteor. They went through a torrid meteor shower, and there was
maybe a global flood,
flood. Yeah, well, they think when the meteors hit the ice caps, it made that massive flood. It was the Younger Dryas impact theory. That's what it's called.
What's the name again?
Younger Dryas impact theory.
Okay, probably named after two guys.
Younger and Dryas. Yeah, that makes sense. John Younger
and Billy
Yeah,
Dryas.
Yeah. So,
I remember them now.
But so he's saying that here's all these things. So obviously there's been some things that he has said that have come true that have predated the original archaeological history.
Yeah.
Like he's saying that, they said that people wouldn't build monolithic, like pyramids or structures like that until they started farming.
Yeah.
So that they were there in a place and they had a reason to build it.
Right.
And so farming,
makes sense.
And so farming, I think they started in much more recent history where people stopped being nomadic. So that's like the general theory of archaeologists. Well, they just found a place in Turkey within the past 10 or 15 years that is like, I don't know, 15,000 or 20,000 years old. And so they were like, well, either, that obviously changes things up, and there's some argument between it. But so Flint Dibble is saying if there were an ancient civilization that was far beyond our understanding, that there would be something left of them, even if there was a massive cataclysm.
Right.
He's saying, as archaeologists, we're looking for that stuff. And Graham Hancock's argument is you guys have barely scratched the surface of looking through stuff. He's like, how much have you looked in the ocean? How much have you looked in the rainforest? And how much have you done all these things? Which I think he's right. Like, from what my brief scratching the surface, looking into it, is they've only mapped or actually looked at like 3% of the rainforest of Brazilian rainforest. That's probably what it is.
So, and Dibble, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Dibble holds that we've looked at enough places that we can discount, we can rule out, but the assumption is that you looked in all the right places.
Yeah. So yeah, he's saying that there would be some evidence, and that we're doing our due diligence. And he's also saying he's leaving it opened, which I think is a really good, he's trying to be open-minded as a scientist and being like, if we found something, we would update history. Like,
right.
we would let him know. And, these guys definitely attack Graham Hancock. Like, they call him, like, he's a like, he's not a scientist. He's a journalist.
Right.
But he's definitely talking to scientists. And
you don't necessarily have to be, quote unquote, like an ordained scientist.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't discount anything that Graham Hancock says just because he's not a quote unquote. I know you don't either.
That doesn't mean anything to me.
I'm just saying on behalf of Dibble and crowd, like they will poo-poo somebody that's not an official ordained scientist. But the problem is those scientists get produced, and facts are interpreted through your presuppositions.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, they're definitely. It's an interest. If you have 4 hours to spend and you want to hear like a really interesting thing, it may even Graham Hancock has a series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse, and he talks about all the stuff, like all of his theories and all of his thoughts. It's at least interesting. Like, it's at minimum, it's worth like looking into it. Just even if you don't believe it, you don't have to believe it. It's just an interesting take on something. And some of the stuff you're like, why is that so old? Like, people are like, well, one of his things is that the Sphinx was built far longer than, I think 4,000 or 6,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's a, what do you call the guys that study rocks?
Geologist.
There's a geologist that basically is saying, like, if you look at the Sphinx, it has wear on it that's indicative of hundreds and thousands of years of rain erosion. Mm-hmm. And the Sahara Desert hasn't been a rainy place for tens of thousands of years.
Right.
So he's saying it was built all the way back then, and obviously people are like, no, impossible. They built it in this, it's this part of the old kingdom, whatever. So there's actually a really funny video where this geologist is showing a picture of this rock to all these geologists, and he's like, how many years of rain damage do you think this is? And they're like, 10,000 years of rain damage. And he's like, perfect. And he zooms out, and it's the Sphinx, and they're all like, oh, we were mistaken. That's wrong. So it's it's at least worth a conversation. I don't even think that he argues that the pyramids are older than they are. I think it's majorly a big thing is the Sphinx, and then also how perfect the pyramids are in relation to, like, he points to like perfect north, and it's got all the geometry of it is like this. I don't even.
The locations of them is unique and interesting.
Yeah, and it's like perfect. Like, there's like a bunch of things that he'll talk about, and Flint Dibble obviously, like, they're going back and forth. But as like a kind of a nerd about this kind of stuff, like it was super. I
bet you loved it.
I was riveted.
As soon as I saw it advertised, I was like, well, I got to watch that because I know Dusty is, and he's going to want to talk about it.
Was
so I find it interesting.
If you watch it, we'll talk about it again. But it was just really funny because you could see like Flint Dibble. They were both getting mad at each other, and they were trying to be like, Graham was like, I forget where they were talking about going, but they were talking about a place maybe in Japan or something where there's like a stone monolith that Graham says is built by humans. And this guy's saying it's a national rock formation. And Graham was like, well, have you ever been there? And the guy was like, well, I've seen pictures. He's like, well, I don't know that you could be accurate. He's like, oh, so I have to go every place. I have to go every place to be. And he was kind of like, well, yeah, you might want to go put your eyes on it versus pictures. It was, you could just tell that they were getting so like, they're mad at each other. They're at
odds. So
they're completely at odds. And Flint had, this is really funny, is that, that the Nazis were really interested in ancient technologies, right?
Right.
So Flint Dibble, one of his quotes was like, Graham Hancock is a Nazi, like a Nazi supporter because he's supporting. And he's like, I'm just looking at, I don't care what they had to do with anything. He's like, I'm just interested in this. And Flint, you're backed into a corner and you're like.
That's when you've lost an argument.
Yeah, he's backed into a corner and he's like, I didn't say it like that. And Joe, of course, Rogan pulls up the quote and he was like, is this your quote? And he was like, it's out of context. He's like, I don't know how that could be out of context.
you were a Nazi.
Yeah. He's like, he supports like Nazi ideologies or something like that. And it's like, he's a white supremacist is basically what he's saying based on his thing.
Right.
And you could tell Graham Hancock was actually like, I mean, tell me how I'm a white supremacist because I think that the world might be older. That I think that technology may be older than it is. And you could just tell he was like, do you want me to pull up some tweets? Like Flint Dibble was like, do you want me to pull up some tweets of what your people have said about me? And Rogan immediately is like, what does that have to do with anything?
It's
you
said
it about him directly. Whatever his people that like him say to you doesn't matter. Yeah. It's not him. So it's definitely worth. And I wanted to talk to you about it a little bit. Do you have any? You haven't listened to it, but do you have any feelings on Graham Hancock's thoughts? Versus,
I don't know enough about what his thoughts are. I've just what you've told me, and just when I saw that advertisement, I thought, well, let me refresh myself on who Graham Hancock is because I recognize the name. And like I said earlier, facts are always interpreted through a framework of understanding.
Yeah,
and you cannot help but apply your presuppositions to those. I don't necessarily agree with the conclusions he draws from some of those facts.
Yeah.
But I can't discount two things. One, he is outside the system observing things that the same guy's inside the system. So a lot of what his thoughts are and then about the facts and then those conclusions he draws differ. And I identify with that in a lot of ways because we're all susceptible to it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to, that makes me want to dig a little bit more about what he has to say about things. So that's one thing. But two, I'm interested in what Joe Rogan, because he's a very inquisitive guy.
Yeah.
And he appears to be, not exclusively, but he appears to be genuinely interested in the pursuit of truth, even if it counters what he thinks to be true.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so, and at times I've seen him come around on a couple of little things that, good for him.
Yeah.
And, but I was curious, like during the question and answer, could you get a feel, was he trying to play it as fair as he could, one, and two, could you tell when he was just calling basically, hey, that's out of bounds, like that instance of the Nazi thing, and could you tell which side he was on?
Yeah, so I think he was pretty fair because immediately when I watched it, I was like, oh, it's 2 against 1. Like it's Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock versus this.
Right.
That was he played it pretty fair. There were definitely a couple times where he stepped in defense of Graham. But you know how like when an intellectual type is so, somebody that's super professional, that's an intellectual type is so bought in on their own ideologies that they laugh when they answer a question like, how could you think like, and he's like, well, hold on a minute. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the guy like dismisses it without really just laughing at it is the dismissal. And there's no fact behind it. It's just like laughing, like nobody believes that. And you're like, well, hold on. People believe, like there was one time where he said, nobody believes that. Mm-hmm. And Joe Rogan stopped him and he was like, I mean, more than nobody believes that. And you can see he was like, well, almost nobody. He's like, I think it's more than almost nobody as well, and like pushed him a little bit. I thought he was pretty fair. They talked about taking, it got heated for a little bit, and they decided to take a break, but he played it pretty fair. But he obviously leans more on the side of exactly what you're saying. It's like, this guy's an outside the box thinker, and maybe you shouldn't just dismiss him like that, and maybe listen to what he has to say, and you're welcome to present your argument. But I felt like he did a pretty good job overall of letting them kind of, it was like a debate. They both had presentations to start. They let each other talk. And then when the presentations were over, it was like the gloves were off, and he would like direct the conversation. But it was overall, like, there was even a couple times where he pushed Graham Hancock, which I didn't think was going to happen, and be like, well, no, that's true. You can't really prove that, or, whatever. But it was, I thought, overall, a pretty fair conversation.
Yeah.
And they probably still don't like each other. But I think it's part of the reason I want to talk about it. It's just, that's like probably one of the most important things that's not happening in our society today.
Right.
Is that two people that couldn't disagree with each other more could sit down and have an actual conversation, and then not like huff off or
just turns into you're a Nazi.
Yeah, you're an idiot or stupid. They can actually have like an intellectual conversation, which I think we probably need to do that more often.
We do, and I came across a good quote recently that it's in the queue of my my Instagram channel, and I think it's Socrates that if you cannot that the intelligent mind or whatever, the wise man, can consider an idea, even if it runs counter to his beliefs, and consider it without adopting it or just rejecting it because he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to take those ideas, mull them over, consider them, and either accept or reject it, but at least consider it in the first place. Yeah, and a lot of folks just refuse to.
People get so defensive that they can't even, there's not even a discussion. They can't even take a step back. And just because you have a conversation with somebody or a disagreement, you don't have to, at the end of it, either one of you change your views.
Right.
It can still be the same.
State your piece and be done with it.
Yeah, I think that's why I like watching that. That's why I was like, I want to see I think it's awesome that they're able to sit down. Now, there were some heated moments, but they're both really passionate about what they're talking about. Right. So of course there's going to be heated moments, but yeah, I think a lot of times people are so, they're so bought into what they think that they can't even talk about somebody else's viewpoint. But you can take somebody's viewpoint in, disagree with it, and then move on like a normal human, and not want to, throw each other down a flight of stairs.
Well, that's the natural thing to do. Is your beliefs get challenged, and then there's an emotional reaction to that, and it's what you do with that reaction or that initial thought that really defines you. If you can't consider it, and then even if you don't, I'm not an expert in Egyptology, nor have I studied it to any degree whatsoever. Just read a little bit. When I say Egyptology, I mean like the deep study, assuming that the Egyptians were some sort of otherworldly type culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a lot of alien influence, perhaps. I love considering that and reviewing the facts and reviewing what people say about those facts and reviewing the conclusions. But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me personally.
Like, I want the theory or the thought of aliens coming and doing or helping the Egyptians build pyramids or doing whatever they did, or the Anunnaki. Like, I want that. Like, I like that. But I can totally understand why somebody would think that that's wrong. Even though I want it to be that. And that's just me wanting to be that's cool. That's a cool, it's interesting. It's a super interesting thing. But I can also understand they were talking about even the basic, the argument that always comes up about the pyramids is the construction.
Yes.
So the argument is how could they ever have got that there? Got those stones that size from point A to point B in this many years that you're saying, and do it. And, in this conversation, Flint's with logs and sand. And, Graham Hancock obviously rejects that and is I don't think there's enough logs and sand in the world for people to be able to drag a stone that big, which, from my brain, it seems like a massive feat.
It is a massive feat. And the assumption that somebody like Flint, and maybe even Graham to some extent, the assumption is those were primitive cultures. Those people were not as smart as we are. And therefore they must have had help. Yeah. Whereas what we observe is people are getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Like we're getting worse at doing things. We build things that don't last.
Yeah.
And so, were they more primitive? Well, they didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
But is that a hallmark of primitiveness?
Yeah. Like
I don't think it is.
Like, I think sometimes people have a hard time tying together that they could have been just as smart as us or smarter.
I think they were.
And used a different technology that we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
And so, like, that Randall Carlson, he's the guy that really believes in the impacts of the impacts of the ice caps from the meteor shower that melted all the ice and whatever, had the flood. Well, he also is very interested in the technology that the Egyptians might have used. And there's a bunch of stuff that people don't even like, sound waves and like changing the molecular structure of the stone to move it in a different form, to like all that kind of stuff. There's, I'm not saying that that's what it was. I'm just saying that it may be a technology that we haven't considered as how they moved whatever they moved to wherever it needed to be. I have no idea. But if somebody came with a time machine and was like, you can go to one place, I'd be like, I want to see these guys build these pyramids is what I want to see. I need to see it. I want to see it. What would you go back and look at?
There's so much that I'd want to see. I don't know. That's a tough call because there's like the immediate, like, oh well, I want to be on that grassy knoll and see what happens.
Oh yeah.
But that's just like a short term with minimal impacts because I think I already know. Yeah. And so the Egyptian time. The time of Jesus, the time of Moses, all those kinds of things that would be very, very interesting to be a firsthand observer and see, okay, what was really happening.
Yeah, I mean, the Egypt is for sure one. I just started recently learning about the first emperor of China. I just started really thinking about
China's an interesting place too.
Dude, I would really like to go back and see what the heck, because that they found like some farmers found his burial site.
Maybe, the first emperor?
Yeah, the first emperor, like maybe in the 70s or something.
Oh, with the stone statue army?
The terracotta army.
Yeah.
And, they still haven't opened his actual sarcophagus yet. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of reasons why. Like there's half of the people are like, well, we don't want to ruin anything. Like this is a piece of history and we don't want to go in there and we're not sure.
And you want to respect the dead.
You want to respect it and you don't want to, like everybody wants to, like just like they did in Egypt, like go in there, open the tombs up and see what's in there.
Yeah, then there's mummies. And
then there's mummies just running all over the place.
Right.
The other one is that they're like, this guy no doubt booby trapped this place. And there's one thing I heard, I was trying to look it up last night I figured that this was going to come up with just talking about ancient Egypt and stuff. So I was trying to look, I had heard this, so I don't have any verification, but that they had tested water near his tomb and it was like riddled with mercury. Ooh. And they were like, he also may have just been like, when I'm dead, mercury everywhere. Don't let anybody come near me.
Right.
They were saying there was like enough or high enough level of mercury that as soon as you walked in, you would just die. Like in the water. So they're assuming that there's some diffusion into the water and they're saying if it's coming from here. But I was talking to Laura about it last night. He's like, isn't that wild? Like this dude, he ruled for not very long, like 10 years or something. But this dude, it was an emperor of China. I forget, I can't say his name, but
there's probably an X in it.
There is, and a Q. You know what we started talking about last night? We were watching Mulan.
Oh, okay.
And so
that follows.
And so I was like, I get so excited. I was like, I just started reading about the first emperor of China. And Laura looks at me and rolls her eyes like, all right, well, what do you got? And I was like, terracotta soldiers everywhere. And
maybe they're going to come alive.
Maybe they could. Maybe if you open that tomb.
It could.
You never know.
The infused atmosphere with mercury.
It just makes them come alive.
Will just like make them come alive.
So I'm surprised. Are you not surprised that we haven't gone in there and opened that up yet?
I am kind of surprised.
I'm shocked. Every time I read about it, like the fact that we haven't gone makes me go conspiracy on it immediately and be like, they're not doing it for a reason. As soon as they found a tomb in Egypt, they were like, number one priority is open this thing. Like we have to open it.
Well, it could be because China is much more restrictive because that was under the communists.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't even think about that.
So they're like very rules.
Yeah.
And in Egypt, it was largely colonized by others.
When did they build the Great Wall of China?
Oh, man. Was it 400 BC? 600 BC? 1600 BC? It was a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. That's my answer.
So somewhere between 4.
I think it was the time of the last eclipse.
Oh, is that when it was? I am now fascinated by the first emperor of China's tomb. Like, I want to know what is going on in there.
Yeah.
Because they obviously, like, they did that for a reason. Like, or maybe it was his personal thing. Like, he was like, when I die, because how long would it take you to build that? I mean, he was only emperor for 10 years. They must have started as soon as he took over.
They had to have.
I mean, he must have been like, at some point, I'm going to die, and that's where I want to go.
Well, I think they all did that. Like, okay, I'm taking over.
Yeah.
Here's my death wishes. Here's what I want to happen.
Yeah, get them started.
Yeah. Get as far as you can until that day happens.
Yeah.
So China and Egypt, definitely very, very interesting, because they're ancient cultures that are still, there's still people that call themselves Egyptians.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, they're still in Egypt.
Yeah.
And there's still a China. And China is much more isolated due to the fact of their relative success at defending their borders, probably because of terrain. Terrain
helps.
Yeah.
Why do you think that China would prevent people from opening up the first emperor's tomb? Is it just like a historical thing? They have to have something to do with it.
It's control. Like, a tyrant controls his population. And if you have new information, well, I don't know what that information is. And so I need to control it. And I'm doing good enough now.
Yeah.
We're not going to open it because I don't know what's in there. And it could upset my power.
Do you think that's why?
I think
that makes sense.
Yeah. That's the most, that's the one that follows the most.
That's what the government says about aliens too.
Yeah.
They're like, if we told you, everybody would just start jumping off.
Pandemonium.
Everybody would just start jumping off buildings. And you're like, there's not one thing I can think of that would make me jump off a building if they were like, aliens did this. There's not one thing I can think of.
I can't either.
That would make me be like, my world as I know it is crumbling. Like, I think what they're saying, this is my opinion, this is Dusty's opinion, no fact behind it. They're alluding to the fact that it has something to do with religion. And that because so many people are religious, like very religious in this country, that if they told you that all these religions would come crumbling to the ground, but I don't necessarily think that that's true.
I don't think that's true because there's nothing that the culture hates more than religion.
Yeah.
Because and nothing a tyrant hates more than religion.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what they try to quash, because if you believe in a transcendent, you don't care about what that guy does. It's really in charge. I mean, you do, but you don't.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson believes that they're been around for forever, and they're spirits, good and bad, like evil and good.
Yeah, me too.
So
now, I don't believe everything Tucker believes, but what you just stated,
so
concur.
So I think that's what he's saying, and what the government's saying is that if people knew this, but I don't think it would change anything.
I don't think so either.
I think there's people that believe in God, and they would believe the same thing that they believed, regardless of what the United States government tells them, right?
Well, I think everybody believes in a God.
Yeah.
You just don't call it a God.
That's fair.
The God of self is the ultimate. That's what the humanist believes, that, well, I rule my own destiny.
Yeah, that's fair.
And they say, well, all I can believe is what I can see, touch, feel, measure now.
Yeah.
But you can't see, touch, feel that statement I just made,
right?
Or what an atheist would make, or what a humanist would make. Mm. So how can you quantify it?
It's fair.
So it's self-defeating.
Yeah. But now that you said that other thing about tyrants hating religion, why wouldn't they want to squash religion? Like, why would they say that?
Why would the government
be like, if they're alluding to the fact that it would affect religion, or I think, but they're tyrants.
They're tyrants. Yeah. They don't want to change the way things go.
Are going good for them right now.
If they had evidence that quashed religion, let's say they could produce Jesus's body, or his remains.
Yeah.
They would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I gotcha.
In a heartbeat, but they don't. So they just kind of hint at it.
Yeah.
Through a third party.
Yeah, gotcha.
And they just create confusion, and you start talking about this instead of what it is they're doing.
Yeah, because they like the way it is right now.
They love it.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good for them.
It's 100% good for them.
Like, I kind of hope.
Dare I say 1,000%.
1,000%. I kind of hope that this is Dusty's secret hope, is that, aliens are real. They come down, they come here, and they land. And Joe Biden or whoever the president is, who thinks he's like, I need to go make contact, and they're like, you're dumb. We don't care about you at all. You're dumb.
Right.
And like, because I think that gives like, they have all this control, and they think it's like, I have all this power, and the president of the United States, and which you do have a lot of power, but technically you work for us. And if you saw somebody just like totally diss the president like that, and you're like, oh, that guy doesn't matter at all.
He doesn't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I hope is like aliens come down and they're like super chill. They're just like, what you guys got going on is nonsense. We hate that. Like y'all need to be free. These guys are crazy. Like I was just, part of the reason I think of that is because every time I think about taxes, I get upset.
Yeah.
And like somebody had just posted like, you get tax on your paycheck, and when you buy gas, you pay tax, and then when you do this, you pay tax. I was like, dude, taxes seriously suck.
They do.
And we revolted against a 3% tax. 3% tax with the British.
And our income tax, just the income tax is about what, 33%?
Yeah, and if you get a bonus or something from work,
goodbye.
See ya. So,
let me ask you this. So you said I really hope this alien, the alien thing comes true, and there's aliens that come down. What if, before I pose that question, do you remember when there was a Twilight Zone episode, and these aliens come down, and they have this book this guy gets a copy of the book, and he's trying to interpret what it means, and they're hosting people to come on their ship so they can visit their planet. And at the end of the episode, he finally translates what the meaning of the manuscript that he had copy of. And it's a cookbook. And so like people are getting aboard the spaceship. And he's like, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. Don't get on. So what if, in that vein, what if these aliens aren't really aliens from another planet, but they're demons?
Yeah.
And they're trying to lure people to do what it is that they want them to do.
What if it's that?
And subjugate us. Yeah.
That stinks. It's not what I want.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
That's not what I want at all. But it's definitely a possibility.
It is 100% a possibility.
Yeah, it's a possibility. If I believe one, so this is my thing with aliens. When somebody says some wild, I told you about that Dr. Greer multiple times, but you may not remember who he is because it's not something that you'd be like, this dude is like far out alien stuff. Like he's far out. And like I consider him a kook. But then in the same thought process, I'm like, well, I can't really think he's a kook. I at least have to listen to what the guy's saying.
Sure, yeah. Examine what he thinks.
Because I also believe in aliens, and my friends that don't think I'm a kook. So it like
I don't think you're a kook.
It's just down chain. It's like this guy's too far alien for me. Where he's like, I close my eyes all the time and I go talk to aliens, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah,
dude.
that's
no, you don't. Come on.
He's talking to something.
Yeah,
it's either himself or demons or aliens.
It's like, Dr. Greer, you look amazing today, and he's like, these aliens got it going on, man. I'll tell you that right now.
You're right.
Yeah, these guys.
What about us?
Yeah, these guys are awesome. But like he goes far off the rails, and like he gets interviewed, and they're like, what's the most, this is maybe just, he just got, it was on an Instagram reel. They were like, what is the most dangerous thing you know? Cause he says, I know all this stuff that I shouldn't know. And he's like, it's just such a triggering statement that like, that it doesn't matter what it is. It's like the government is going to make a false flag operator thing with aliens. Is that we're going to think there's aliens and that there's not really aliens, there's not a threat, or they're not really threatening us, and it starts this global interplanetary war. And I'm like, it's a very triggering in terms of like, you're like, oh my God.
It's thought-provoking?
Yeah, thought-provoking. It's not triggering. You're like, could they do that? And you're like, well, yeah, they could definitely do it.
Right.
But at this point, like if they tried to do something like that, you would need to have like aliens. Like you can't just say it. Like you can't be like, we got messages from aliens.
Right.
And we're going to have to go to war. People are going to be like, we're going to want to see the aliens before we sign off on this.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're going to start sending missiles up into space?
Yeah.
Like, not going to happen, dude. You have to chill out in the missiles in the space thing. Well, good. That was, I talked about a whole bunch of stuff that I really enjoy on that one. I don't need to get into the sports stuff. I'm going to save that for my next episode.
That'll be the next one. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking about all that. Please listen or watch Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble. And if you only listen to it, also Google search a picture of Flint Dibble just so you can see who's talking, because he's a character.
Does he look like a world-renowned geologist?
He looks like somebody said, you should dress like Indiana Jones.
Oh,
and he was
man,
like,
I hate
he's
that.
like with the hat and everything, and they're like, especially the hat.
Does he have a bullwhip?
He's probably in his pocket that I couldn't see, but I don't know why I thought it was so funny. He's got this like Indiana Jones cap, and he's got a beard, And you're like, but then like he's clearly like a short person, like not short, not like a, not like a dwarf or anything, but he's like short guy. And it's like he's wearing his dad's shirt. Like the sleeves come out of his coat like 6 inches, and it's like his hand is covered by the coat, the shirt.
So like it's as if he's 12 and he said he wanted to be a geologist and his mom dressed him.
Yes, it's like your son was like, I really want to dress up like Indiana Jones for Halloween, and you were like, all I have is my clothes, and he wears your clothes
and your grandpa's hat.
Yeah, and you'll just have to do.
Done.
Yeah, so he looks like he's just a funny. I don't mean to say funny looking. He just is just like what you think this guy's like. He has theme music when he walks onto an archaeological dig. It's like, that's what I think. So, but listen to
he doesn't really. You just think that.
That's what I think.
Okay. I thought he legitimately did.
Like he puts his Walkman headphones on and he plays the Indiana Jones theme song as he walks out there.
Members only jacket.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, like listen to that episode. It's worth a listen. I think you'll just like it, even if you don't care. Like even if you as a listener, you don't care about the two topics. It's just interesting to listen to them go back and forth and talk about what their beliefs are. And they do talk a little bit about aliens. Kind of dip in there just because some of the ancient. But just for a second, just like keep it out there. And then they talk about ancient Egypt. It's a pretty good listen. So
I'll check it out. Probably this week.
Do it. And then let me know. We'll follow back up.
Yeah.
All right, guys. This has been Mishmash Man Podcast. Until next week.
See you.
Goodbye.